let's start with some prayer requests. Are there some? I'll start us off. We have a friend in Wisconsin, a mother, fairly young mother, who's having her third brain surgery with tumors. She thought that they were all taken care of and thought that, you know, she was on the road to recovery, but her name is Chelsea, and she's having her surgery next Monday. And her prayer is that she doesn't have side effects from going in and taking tumors out of your brain. Yes, I would pray for that too. Anybody else?
I have a close cousin that this is her third bout with cancer, and she's 54.
Oh.
So they think it's terminal this time.
Eileen, could you repeat that? I didn't.
A cousin, it's her third bout with cancer, and I think it's terminal this time. She's 54.
And her first name?
Carla.
Carla. Anybody else have any praises too? Yes, Arliss.
Well, here we go again. This is the third year I've been asking for prayers for Ashton. He's still in prison. He still hasn't been sentenced. He's been convicted and not sentenced. And we are still trying to get the trial overturned. It was a total injustice. And recently he was beat up by a guard. And the guard turned it around because there were two guards present. They say Ashton started it, and there were no prisoners to witness the fact that Ashton was not the aggressor. And he is praying right now that God will take him out, literally.
Call him home.
Kill him.
Yeah.
He's giving up. And we're going up on the 25th for his sentencing.
Okay. That's so sad. Any praises too? And always we're happy to. You had a grandchild?
A couple months ago.
Oh, it was a couple months ago. Well, that's all right. You had all right.
Our fourth boy. One girl, second girl.
Yeah.
Nelson's sister, Libby Carroll, she's in an assisted living right now. I don't know if she'll ever be able to leave there, but she does seem to be making progress slowly. She had, a number of strokes, and so this is the second facility that she's been in. The first one was just rehab, and now she's in. So just keep Libby in your prayers. And then my sister's son-in-law's parents, New Year's weekend, when we had that terrible storm,
Yeah.
their home was struck by lightning.
Wow.
They got out with what they had on. They managed to grab their two little dogs, and that was it. I mean, they've gone back with a metal detector, and they found her wedding ring.
Oh my.
And they found a little carousel that had been her grandmother's, I think it was. But I mean, other than that, everything is gone. So, it's just, it's a Todd family.
Okay.
My son-in-law's mother, Molly Dirksen, died 3 weeks ago, and natural causes, just long-term. And there was a lovely funeral service down in Spartanburg. And I just ask you to pray for Kirk's family, because it's a capital D of dysfunction. And I think I've been praying that Molly's death might provide some reconciliation with the 3 boys. My daughter tells me I've got a lot of faith in God. Not that I do, but it's been rough.
Anybody else? Anything? Okay, well, let's go to the Lord in prayer then. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this, the start of another day, of another month, of another year. Your mercies are endless, they're timeless. Your grace is all around us in everything that we see and do. And we thank you for the world that you've provided us. It's man who seems to make a mess of things, and we continue to do that, as is exemplified with the world situation in Eastern Europe. We ask that you give some wisdom to the leaders of the world who have it within their power to make decisions which will kill thousands of people. We ask that you be with our leaders in the United States, who at times seem to be overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problems that we face in the United States, not just COVID, but inflation, and the cost of living is just makes it so unbearable for particularly those in poverty. And we ask for your comfort and support for those that have been suffering with COVID and continue to. We bring to you intercessory prayers this morning for some specific people, for Chelsea, Carla, Ashton, Libby, the Todd family, Kirk's family. And we ask that you remind us on a daily basis to keep these people in our prayers and in our thoughts, that it's through prayer alone that your work gets done. Our intercessory prayers are so important, and we ask that you serve to remind us of that daily. We give you thanks for the health of families too, while we in one breath are asking for protection for those that are suffering. We are so grateful for the birth of new life, of grandchildren, we're all connected to little Anderson, and we are grateful for his birth and the journey that Ann and Jeremy have been on. We ask now that you bless this study of Elijah. It's going to be a challenge as we approach this study, because Elijah's challenges are so relevant for us today, and help us to approach the study with an open heart and with a maturity that we can take away something very meaningful from this study. We ask all these things in your Son's holy name. Amen. Well, I would be remiss if I did not start the morning with peanuts. And it just so happens that there's a New Year's cartoon. Lucy and Charlie Brown are walking down this snowy street, and Lucy says, "I hate this year. Everyone said things would be better, but they're not. I don't think this is a new year at all. I think we've been stuck with a used year. And COVID makes that seem very appropriate. Yeah, so apropos. The study of Elijah is going to be challenging. I've had the opportunity, you have not, to go through the study guide. It's not that the homework is terrible, I don't mean that, but it's the content, the message that Priscilla sets forth, the challenges that Elijah presents. And I think that we just have to hang in there each week because there's a lot to digest. But she does it in a very viewer-friendly way. There's not a lot of jokes or anything like with some people that have these video presentations, but she does a really fine job. Let's watch the video and then we can go from there and we'll have a little bit more of a frame of reference of what we can talk about. It's hard when I've done the homework for this week and you all have not, so I know what you're going to experience. You guys don't yet, so we'll get started a little bit on the homework too. Let's go ahead with the...
Right here at the inauguration of our Bible study, I want you to know that one of the most beautiful nuances that you are going to begin to see unfold throughout each and every week of our study together, and every single time that we meet together over the pages of Scripture, you're going to see this beautiful picture of an almighty, covenant-keeping God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. The God who has a plan for redemption that's going to reach down through the annals of time and history. That omnipresent, omniscient God, what you're going to see is that He wants to interact with one individual, that He wants to be seen by one individual, that He wants to be heard, that He wants to be experienced. I want to tell you that He wants to be seen by you. He wants you to hear Him. He wants you to experience Him. That's why He's brought you to today. And so whatever reservations that you might have, whatever cares and concerns you have about whether or not you have the capacity, the ability to hear from God and to really experience Him in a fresh way, lay those all down at the feet of Jesus right now. Just open up your heart, open up your hands, and let's get ready to meet with God. I live in Dallas, and in Dallas, particularly around the holiday season, there are a bunch of fun runs. We enjoy doing them together as a family, and a few years ago, my sister and I did one around the Christmas holiday that was called the Hot Chocolate Run. It's a whole bunch of fun. People come out at night, you know, we got sparkly lights on our heads or our pajamas, whatever it is that you want to do, just a short run in, and they give you a bunch of hot chocolate at the end. We took our kids. You can do 1 mile or 3 miles or 5 miles, whatever you want to do. But the run goes through an area of Dallas called the Design District. Now, I've got to tell you, I have never really known a whole bunch about the Design District. I know people that work there. I have been there a time or two for an event that was happening in the area. But it's just a part of town right near downtown that really is filled with people who are artisans, folks that help in interior design and decorating. And so they're all sort of pooled into this one area. And most folks know that the Design District exists because there's a huge billboard right off of the main thoroughfares going right through the center of downtown Dallas that says the Design District. So I was born and raised in Dallas. I've seen that huge billboard for as long as I can remember. But the hot chocolate run actually starts at one end of the design district, and then it sends you on a run that is a course going in and out, around and through the streets that run inside of the design district. So here I am on the hot chocolate run, running through the design district, and for the first time, I was seeing nuances and intricacies and details about the design district that I never knew existed. I'd known it from afar, I'd known it from a real high level, but I didn't know the details about it until I went through it. This is part of what intrigued me about this study. In fact, when I looked at the life of Elijah, it became the major gist of everything that drew me to this incredible narrative in the context of Scripture. It's about God taking a guy through some stuff so that he could see some details about God that he wouldn't have known before, so that he could have his own strength and character fortified, so that he could get a little spiritual backbone that would serve him well for the purposes that God had planned for him. That's what this study is about. It's for any of us that want to have victory, that want to have the character that God wants us to have as daughters of the Most High King, for any of us that want to make sure that we actually have the spiritual fiber to be able to stand up in an increasingly post-Christian era. Well, then to know some of those details about who our God is, and to know some of the details about who he's called us to be, to not just see it from a high level, broad perspective, but to really see it closely, the details of who our God is and who he has called us to be, well, then we got to go through something. Elijah is going to help us with that. This is what drew me to him. He is frail. He's human. We're going to see that in many ways he's just like us. But the overarching view of his bravery and courage, his confidence and boldlessness, his audaciousness, his sheer chutzpah to show up out of nowhere when we first see him in the context of the Old Testament. He shows up in one of the most powerful places in all of Israel at the time, in front of one of the most powerful people at the time, to declare the word of the Lord. He's bold, and it's staggering when we see him show up on the landscape of the pages of Scripture. We need to know what he went through to give him that kind of boldness. We need to know the path that God took him on, putting one foot in front of the other, one day after the other, 1 week that went into the next, 1 year that went into the next. What Elijah went through to craft him into the sort of individual that God could use like that. At first glance, when I look at personalities in the Old Testament or in the Scriptures as a whole, when I look at personalities or narratives like this one, I'm always drawn to the highlights, the highlight reel. We're always looking at the Mount Carmels of people's experiences. I'm drawn to Mount Carmel because it was a dazzling display of God's glory on this big stage in an unforgettable way that was going to transform everybody's experience. Here we are talking about it centuries and millennia later because it was so incredibly staggering. Everybody wants the Mount Carmel. We want the flashy display of God's glory in our life. We want fire falling down from heaven. Everybody wants the highlights of other people's reels. So when we look at Moses' reel, we see highlights. And when we look at Jonah, we remember the highlight. When we look at Gideon, we remember the highlight. When we see Joshua and Rahab and all of these heroes of the Scripture, Paul, and yes, Elijah, we remember the Mount Carmels of their experience. And yet, in the shadows of these magnificent events is a process. There's always a process, a preparation that enables folks like Elijah to really get to know their God, to increase their capacity in prayer, to fortify their faith, to get them in step and in alignment with the heart of God and with the purposes of God. So when he steps foot on Mount Carmel, which we will get there, and when he is surrounded on all sides by those who refuse to discontinue being lukewarm in their allegiance to Yahweh, he's got enough backbone to keep him standing strong and standing in confidence on Mount Carmel because of the process that God took him through. So if you and I want to have the kind of prayer life that summons the fire of God, if we want to have the kind of spiritual backbone and fortitude that can stand steady, even when we have to stand alone because others are watering down the truth of our God, then we've got to be willing to go through the process with God. So here's the question that I'm asking you right here on the onset of our time together, and that you're going to see written again when you join me in your study in the written materials that you have in your hand, probably right this moment. Here's the question I'm going to ask again and again. Are you willing to do what Elijah did to get what Elijah got? That's the question. Are we willing to submit ourselves to the process to walk with God through, yes, some difficult stuff or things that might feel like we're a fish out of water? They might make us feel a little bit isolated, and sometimes they just feel plain old flat out like pain or like loss. But are we willing to surrender to the plan and the purposes of God so that we can walk through that process and come out on the other side prepared to be who God has called us to be? God is raising up a remnant of people. He's raising you up. That's why I think we're going to be together for these 6-7 weeks that we have in this Bible study. He's raising us up because he wants to send us into key positions and places to be his spokesperson. And when he does, there can't be an inch of fear on us. There can't be a droplet of intimidation. There's no time for panic or fright or dread or anxiety. There is a nation, there is a classroom, there is a courtroom, there's a university, there's a high school, there's an office, there is a neighborhood that needs somebody to rise up in the spirit of Elijah. And I've come to tell you that I think it's you, and I believe that it's me. So he's preparing us even now. All the stuff you've been through, all the difficulties that you've faced, the surprises that you've had to endure, the delays and the disturbances and the detours that you've navigated. I'm here to tell you they've all been a part of the process. That even right now, as we go through this Bible study together, this right here, this is a part of the process that God has for me and that he has for you. And if we'll surrender to the seasons of our life that we're in right now, the ones you've been through, the ones that are coming in your future, as we surrender to the rhythms of life that God allows us to traverse, the difficulties and the joys, we find that they are crafting us. They are molding us into the image of Christ, and they're preparing us with what we need for the Mount Carmels that we don't even see coming yet. It all starts in 1 Kings chapter 17. So, if you have your Bible with you, I want you to actually flip over to 1 Kings chapter 17. If you actually still use a Bible with paper pages like I do, or you might have, graduated onto the electronic version, whatever iPhone, iPad, any manner of iNess that you have available to you, just get to 1 Kings 17, because I want to tell you as you are turning there that we're going to spend most of our time in a couple of chapters that are right here in this portion of Scripture. This is where we first meet Elijah. So as you get there, let me tell you just a little bit about the context of where we find Elijah and this portion of his narrative situated in the Old Testament. 1st and 2nd Kings are full of tragedies. Really, it's a record of the failure, one failure after another, of kings who refused to honor Yahweh and a people who were increasingly antagonistic towards the things of God. It shows God's people actually being divided and turning their backs against each other instead of standing firm, united against a common enemy. It shows a time when idolatry is not just being tolerated, and it is not just celebrated, but it's actually now being legislated. So in other words, the text that you and I are going to be looking at is basically an ancient mirror that reflects the world you and I are living in right now. And whether it's a global medical pandemic or it's crippling racial tensions that are bubbling up to the surface of our national consciousness, or it's increasingly widespread lack of respect and surrender to the one true God at the top rungs of leadership all the way down to the furthest echelons of society, what you need to know is that what you're about to read in these portions of Scripture, this is us. And into this chaos, God commissions an individual to stand on his behalf, to carry his mantle, to call people off of the fence line of hesitation to holy, full-on commitment, to call them on the carpet about their rebellion, about the systematic legislation of idolatry. Elijah marches onto the biblical landscape and goes right to King Ahab and declares the results of the people's sin and rebellion against God. He is the new Moses. He stands against royal oppression and seeks to preserve God's people. And so he shows up in 1 Kings chapter 17, standing in front of the king, and he says, Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, he says to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, surely there will be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. I want to just start right here at this one verse before we delve into the other portions of scripture that you and I are going to hit throughout these weeks together. It's just this one verse that I want to be cemented in your heart, and these beautiful principles to be cemented in your heart as well as we move forward, because we're going to have to take our own stand just like Elijah does in this passage. So let's look at it together, because he says some key things that we have to have rolling around in our minds and in our hearts, and that the Holy Spirit's going to challenge each of us toward. Elijah, first of all, points out that Yahweh is his God. He's very clear, unapologetic. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't water it down. He doesn't try to make it palatable for the person that he's standing in front of. He gets in front of the highest position of power in the land, and he speaks truth to power. He says, Yahweh is my God. Now listen, you need to know that that is actually what Elijah's name means. Elijah means Yahweh is God. This means that before Elijah even said one word, when he was just standing there and someone whispered his name, someone said, this is Elijah that has come into the presence of King Ahab, just his mere presence and the mention of his name was enough for people to know where he stood. So before we even get into what Elijah said, can I just ask you, what is your reputation? Can I ask you that when people whisper your name, that when your name is said, especially in your absence, what is the kind of character that people think of? What is the kind of standing that you are known for? Is it that when we are not in the room, when we're not at the office building, when we are not there walking down high school student, the hallways of our high school, or we're not college student in the corridors of that college campus, in our absence, when someone speaks our name, have we been bold enough? Have we had enough integrity? Have we had enough character in our lives that even when we're not around, when people just say our names, they know where it is that we stand? Elijah's name meant Yahweh is God. And at a time when people would come to positions of power like this, they would come to the king, and they wanted to pacify the king. We find that out actually in other chapters in 1 Kings, most notably chapter 22 of 1 Kings, verse 13. We find out that the prophets would come, or that people would come, and they would stand before the king, and they wanted to do everything they could to simply placate him, to pacify him, and to do everything they could to preserve their own life. Elijah comes boldly and unapologetically. And under King Ahab, idolatry hadn't just been tolerated and accepted. Now it was legislated. And along with Jezebel's influence, it permeated throughout the entire land. And so Elijah had to be incredibly bold to make this declaration when he came in front of the king. He says clearly, the Lord is God. The Lord is God. Does your life say that? And then do you declare that out of your mouth? Have I gotten so used to wanting to have the acceptance of our peers, or to be politically correct, that we've begun to water down this important seminal principle that a lost and dying world needs to know now more than ever before, that our God reigns. He is still sitting on the throne. He still is everything that he said he is, and that he still can do everything that he has said that he can do. Yahweh is God. But he didn't just say Yahweh is God. He said Yahweh is my God. Elijah personalizes it. I want to show you where he says in verse 1, not only as the Lord God of Israel lives, he says, he is the one before whom I stand. He personalizes it. He says to Ahab, I want you to know where I'm standing. I want you to know where my allegiance lies. I want you to know where I have pledged the totality of my commitment and devotion. Yahweh is not just God, but I want you to know that he's my God. Now, what I find interesting about this is, remember that as Elijah says this, he is actually physically standing in the presence of the king. Scholars don't even know how he got there. No one knows for sure how he was allowed, because people weren't just casually allowed into the presence of the king. So only by the divine sovereign hand of God was he even allowed to be in the king's presence, probably surrounded by the king's men at this point, probably having some notice of the fact that his life could be in jeopardy. In this moment, there he stands, not knowing how he got there, but there he stands, and he makes a clear declaration about the deity of Yahweh. And then he says, I want you to know that even though I'm standing in front of you physically, my standing is elsewhere. My allegiance and devotion and commitment is somewhere else outside of you, King Ahab. So really, I'm standing in two places at once. I'm here, but I'm not really here. My allegiance is pledged to the one true God. This is important for all of us to think about, because physically we are standing in so many different arenas and places and spaces where in those places we're going to have to be clear that even though I'm talking to you and I'm contributing to this process and I'm a part of this endeavor and I'm contributing my skills, my talents, my abilities, my creative efforts, I'm involved in whatever your job or ministry or organization is, I'm standing here. But let's be clear, my allegiance is always pledged to the one true and only God. And if at any point the agenda of this organization or the agenda of this action actually begins to detour away from my primary allegiance, I'm always going to choose the allegiance to Yahweh over and above any agenda that diverts away from the truth of my God, because he is not just God, but he is my God. So I'm physically standing here. But let's be clear, Ahab, my allegiance is always and only pledged to Yahweh. You know, countries have embassies. So there's, for example, the American Embassy, and the American Embassy is situated in different countries. It's a little bit of America on foreign soil. So if there are Americans that are traveling outside of the country, they find themselves in trouble, they've got to get as quickly as they possibly can to the embassy. That's because behind the walls or behind the gates where the embassy sits, right there in a foreign environment, but behind that particular gate, that means that the laws of the United States reign there. The policies of the United States reign there at the embassy. The people who work there on that premises, even though they're in a foreign country, behind those gates at the embassy, they are actually employed for the government that is represented by that particular embassy. So the embassy doesn't change and adapt and abandon American regulations just because it's situated on foreign soil. It's standing in a physical location, but its allegiance and devotion and commitment is pledged elsewhere. So I encourage you that no matter where you find yourself standing, and no matter how foreign the soil may be or how antagonistic that it may be to the things that you know are the truth of God as explained in his word, or the character of our God Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. No matter how antagonistic it may be to the heart and the mind and the character of God, remember that as you are standing there, you are the embassy for the kingdom of heaven. You represent God right where he has situated you, right there in that office, right there in that campus, right there in that courtroom or in that boardroom or in that medical facility. You are a representative of your home. And I don't know if you knew it or not, but if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, this is not your home. This is where you're situated for a little while. But we're on our way home, and until we see him face to face, we are his ambassadors. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, he says, I am an ambassador of my king. Elijah says, Yahweh is God. And Yahweh is not just God, he's my God. And then he says, I want you to also know, King Ahab, that Yahweh lives. He says, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives. This is the distinction that will separate Yahweh from every other so-called God that they had positioned before them and that they had legislated now that everyone as a community and as a nation was supposed to worship. He says, let's be clear. There are many things that separate our one true God from all of the idols of the day. But the main thing that Elijah points out is this. He says, our God is alive. There is only one God who lives. There is only one God who reigns. There is only one God who can actually, literally participate in the lives of people, sustaining them, keeping them, providing for them, protecting them. There is only one God worth serving, and it is not Ahab, your impotent, lifeless idol. It is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yahweh is the one who is in charge. And he says, here's how you're going to know it. And here's how God is going to remind you that he alone is alive. Elijah says at the end of verse 1, there will be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. Now, Elijah's pronouncement of judgment isn't him grasping at straws. He isn't just making up a judgment that sounded handy in the moment. He actually is reaching back into Deuteronomy. He's reaching back to the covenant that had been established by Yahweh when the children of Israel were first freed out of Egypt. You'll remember after 400 years of captivity, they are freed out of that ruthless, abusive slavery at the hands of Pharaoh and the taskmasters that he assigned. They are freed miraculously after 10 plagues that Yahweh gives to free them from Egypt. And then they are taken into the wilderness where the Lord Yahweh begins to make them into a nation, his beloved people. He says, you will be mine and I will be yours. And he establishes a covenant with them. And in Deuteronomy 28, let me just read to you what it says. God said to the people, if you are not careful to obey the Lord your God, to observe, to do all that his commandments and his statutes, which I charge you today, then the heavens, here's the judgment, the heavens which are over your head will be as bronze, and the earth under your feet will be as iron, meaning the sky will be closed, and the earth will remain dry if you do not obey me and keep my commandments as my beloved people. For an agrarian society like this, that thrived based on the rain, helping their crops to be able to yield a harvest, this would have been a devastating pronouncement. Their very lives hung in the balance. And this was a direct assault against the power of the idol that they had decided as a nation to serve. Baal was the storm god. Baal was their god of choice. Baal was the god that under Jezebel's influence had been legislated into the throes of their society and in the throes of their living. And so here they had set Baal before them as the god that would produce storms, as the god that would make sure that the rain fell so that the harvest that they were planting in their agrarian society would yield a robust harvest so that it could sustain the lives of them, their loved ones, their community, and ultimately their nation. So they were, trying to constantly appease him in order to ensure that the sky would remain open. They thought he caused the rain. They thought he protected their crops. They thought that he sustained their lives because they assumed that he was alive. And this is why the judgment of drought was so necessary at this moment. Because not only was it a judgment against their rebellion, but it was also a specific indictment against the power of Baal. It was a spotlight on his impotence. He had no power because he was not alive. And so I've got to ask you, what are the specific illegitimate things that you've been counting on to sustain you? Is it a relationship that, honestly, when you think about it, you've turned it into an idol because you're counting on it to sustain you? Is it that monetary gain that you've begun to count on illegitimately to sustain you? Is it the approval of peers? Y'all, in our social media driven society, we can get so caught up in wanting the approval of people, in wanting to be noticed and wanting to be accepted within a particular group of people or in a conversation of people. Is it success, maybe, in ministry? You've started counting on that success to actually give you a sense of significance and a sense of acceptance. Is it religious activity that maybe you've begun to count on to sustain you? If you're just busy enough, you feel like you're good enough. What is it that you have been, or that I have been, inadvertently looking toward to keep us afloat? There is no idol that can sustain you, because idols are not alive. Habakkuk chapter 2, the prophet put it this way: what good is an idol that is carved by the hands of man, a cast image that will just deceive you? How foolish it is to trust in your own creation, a God that can't even talk. What sorrow awaits anyone who says to idols, "Wake up and save us," to speechless stone images, "Rise up and teach us." Can an idol tell you what to do? It's just an image overlaid with gold and silver. It might look nice, in other words, but it's lifeless on the inside. But the Lord our God, he is in his holy temple, so let all the earth be silent before him. Yahweh says to the king, and it is the declaration that you and I, in the spirit of Elijah, must rise up with, in boldness, in courage, in confidence, and in full integrity. As we are empowered by the Spirit of God, we must be bold declarers that Yahweh is still the one true God. And he's not just the God, he is our God. We are in personal relationship with him by virtue of his Son, Jesus Christ, who shed his blood on Calvary for us. And our God is alive. I want to tell you in closing that I have been to Israel about 3 times or so. I've had the privilege to go over the past 20 years about 3 times. And every single time I go, I'm mesmerized by a new facet that I didn't notice the first time. There is just so much to take in. There's no way you can get it all. And on any one trip, you're just sort of standing there looking at every single thing, trying to take notes, trying to listen to the tour guide, because they're so wise and learned, and there's so much rich culture and history there, especially for those of us who are believers in the truths of Scripture. We get to see it come to life. But every time I'm there, even though there are different nuances that I gather each time, there is one thing that never escapes my notice, and it compels me to literally get down on my knees every time I see it. And that is that when you are led into the garden tomb area, where it is believed that Jesus' body was laid, and they show you there the opening and the tomb where Jesus' body would have been positioned after he was crucified and before he was resurrected. There is a sign on the little doorway that they have placed there right before the opening. And when you look at the sign before you ever walk in, the sign on the door says, "He is not here. He is alive." I can't tell you how grateful I am, and how I have never been so grateful in my life to see nothing. I mean, I have never been that excited to see absolutely nothing, but I'm so glad that he is not there, because our God is alive. And even right now, with the difficulties that you are facing, with the struggles that I am having, with the nuances of all of our lives that we are traversing through, listen, I'm very aware that this Bible study has likely met you at a time in your life where, listen, you got stuff going on. This is life. We live in the world where there are diagnoses that come in, where there's economies that take dives, where there's relationships that have breaches and struggles. I'm very aware of the fact that this is meeting you at a time where you're going through real life stuff. I want you to know that this is the hope of our salvation, that he is not in the tomb anymore. He's raised from the dead, and he currently lives. He is seated at the right hand of the Father, ever making intercession for you and for me. That means that we are never alone. So we can have the courage to rise up in the spirit of Elijah and to make sure we are his mouthpiece in this generation. As you go into this first week of your Bible study, I encourage you to dive deeply, not just into studying Scripture. I mean, I hope it's in your head. We need our Bible knowledge, but don't just study it. The only point in knowing the Scriptures is to come into a more intimate and personal relationship with the one who lives, Jesus Christ. Lord Jesus, I thank you for this privilege and this opportunity to launch into this study with my sisters. I pray, Father, that in these days and weeks we will share together, that by your Spirit you will open up our understanding, open up our hearts to experience you in such a radical way that it will literally revolutionize our lives forever. And Lord, for your glory. Thank you that you live. In Jesus' name.
Okay.
Lucy and Linus have their own idol issues. Lucy yells to Linus, "You always overdo things. It's all right to like a teacher, but it's wrong to worship her." Linus says, "I never said I worship her. I just said that I'm very fond of the ground on which she walks." We have our own idols, and what's your initial reaction to what
She's amazing. She's amazing.
I just feel like this is the third time I've seen this first. I feel like I should listen to it. Maybe every day is overkill, but once a week I need to be reminded that I'm supposed to represent Christ in my life everywhere I am, and I pretty much fail a lot. And so, but I mean, how powerful is that? I mean, it just makes it real, especially living in this world we're in right now. Although I suspect every generation has said that the world in which they are living is pretty terrible.
Let's go around the room if you want. What sort of reputation do you feel that you have? I mean, project onto what are going to be the eulogies. What was your reputation? You know? I have grandchildren who project what my eulogy will be. You're old. You know, I mean, yes, I got that part. But, you know, why do you go to church so much? Why do you have so many church meetings? Well, I can't answer that exactly. But I mean, I would rather be remembered for going to a lot of church meetings than to going to do some other things. And you have to think that it wears off a little bit, rubs off onto them, and they're thinking of what's important in life. But what do some of you think? What is your reputation like to people around? Do people look at you and say, there's a representative of the Christian faith? You know, I don't know that, you know, she talked about being an ambassador and that we're supposed to be an ambassador where we're standing. I was in a writers organization in Milwaukee where it was so opposite my political beliefs in so many areas, but in particular in homosexuality, that I stopped going because I felt that I was the lone person on being so accepting of it. And when the teacher was also homosexual, I didn't stand up and say something, but I removed myself from the situation. And I don't know that that's really being very bold, that she will challenge us to be. Anybody have, Margie?
I heard a very great pastor one time say, we should always evangelize our God. We can use words if we have to. And I've taken that to heart. Of course, you all know I'm bashful.
Very shy.
Very shy. But I did not realize that where I worked at Caroline's Medical Center, there about you couldn't project your faith onto others. But I've worked there almost 30 years, and in the last 15 or so that I worked there, when we would go to lunch together, the group that would come and sit at my table would always be quiet because they knew I was going to say grace. I didn't have to yell it at them or hit them over the head with it. Here, you know, it was very simple, but people recognize if it's real.
Yes.
And to me, that's the most important thing we can do with our faith, is to let other people see in that little window that it's really there, even when nobody's looking, and even, you know, in the closet, as Daniel did. I really believe that's the most important part of your faith, is to have people see that you live it, not that you spout words.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Well, just when you're out at a restaurant, and how many people around you at a table will have a blessing, just a quiet, they're not inviting every table around them, they're just at their own table. I think that speaks volumes too. Something as simple as that. Yes, Cindy?
I think everybody, in different seasons of their life, they have a way of projecting what they stand for. And I think as young people or in college, you may be trying to figure all that out, so you might be a little more wishy-washy. But as you grow and age, I think you begin to stand for certain things when you're, you know, young married or raising your children or whatever. That people may come to know you at a certain time for what you stand for. And I think the wonderfulness of getting older is to be able to see that growth in you, and then to reach a point where you're not so fearful. I know I'm not so fearful now to stand up, you know, and I don't really care what that person thinks, you know, to stand up and say what I believe. But like Margie was saying, several years ago I worked for the March of Dimes, and I worked out of their Charlotte office, and then I traveled to 3 different counties. And it was a similar situation. The younger people there, me and I was job sharing with someone. And there was a lot of talk about what everybody did the night before, and where they were out, and what they were doing. And there was a lot of not so great jokes that would be bantered about. It was primarily women, too, and I found it really interesting. But I was so blessed. The girl that I job shared with, the woman I job shared with, she and I are both Christian, and we finally said a few times in a staff meeting or here or there that we really would prefer that if that language wasn't used, or if this would happen or that would happen. And gradually, after the course of a year, it was so interesting to see, because periodically someone would say, "No, don't say that." You know, Cindy or Jacqueline would not care for that. It's not appropriate in this place. And so we actually did begin to see a change in the climate of that office. And I've never had that happen before. So it was a good thing to hear and to see.
Anybody
Don't
else?
you feel like in our current culture of social media, that the danger, and I use the word loosely, the danger of standing your ground, stating your purpose, sharing your core belief, puts you right out there it's literally the modern day version of torture, of being a Christian, and yet you're going to get blown apart, maybe not physically, but emotionally. So that I am seeing on social media, and I'm not out on everything in the world, very few what I call Christian points of view. It's like we've retreated, that we're not going to put ourselves out there because we know we're going to get 20,000 blasts. against what we said. We are no longer politically correct. So I really feel like we live in persecuted times. And that's why like I said, the third time around on this one, it's like we just need to be reminded of who we are and what we're expected to do and be.
It's a bit scary. I mean, it's a bit scary too, because I remember I used to run these youth programs at a recreation facility for a while, and I remember walking down the hall one day. This was about 35 plus years ago. There was a young man using four-letter words and that kind of thing, and I called him on it, and I said, "You don't talk like that here. You get out, or you shut your mouth." And and he, at that point in time, he respected my position. Well, I was in. I hate to go in Walmart, but wonderful things there. But I was in Walmart just a few weeks ago, and just walking down the aisle, and somebody was using the F word and just going off. And I turned around and I just went, "Really?" I said, there were children there, and I just went, "Really? Can you not, refrain from that language?" And she just blasted me. She just, "Who do you think you are telling me what to do?" And I was just like,
yeah, I had literally that same experience at Kohl's in Huntersville before Christmas. I'm just this person caught between two women who are having a cat fight about and I watched it occur. Apparently, one woman and her two boys, and the two boys said or did something that the other woman thought inappropriate. And then I thought, it goes downhill from there, because these two women are screaming at each other, filthy language. The kids are gone, it's like, get out of here. And I'm like, and so I have to walk between them. And so I very carefully walk between them. And we're talking, when cussing starts, it becomes silent, and you hear it everywhere. And I'm thinking, where's security when you need them?
Yeah.
Do I want to say anything? And I looked at the one woman and I said, if you're so worried about the inappropriateness of the two boys, do you know what you sound like right now in this store?
Oh, it's a wonder she didn't slap him.
Oh no, she told me to F off. But I moved forward and I saw two young women with earplugs in, and I thought, well, maybe they work for Kohl's. And I said, I'm looking for whatever I was looking for, and I couldn't find it. She says, "Oh, it's right up front. You probably walked right past it." I said, it was hard to walk past anything except what the two women in the front of the store. And she says, "Oh, we're on the lookout for them right now." So she walked me right. They were security. And I thought, oh, you two kids, those two women will make mincemeat out of you if you try to physically do anything to them. But, I mean, we're talking Kohl's, a week before Christmas.
Yeah.
And unbelievable.
Arliss?
I'm probably going to upset some people, but I'm going to say this. I am not nearly as upset by the F word or the SH word as I am the commonplace, "Oh God, I think I got a rut in my stockings." Jesus Christ, I missed that point on tennis. And that's where I call people out. To me, using the F word or the SH word or any of those words shows you have no class.
Yeah.
You're kind of obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a sin. And I have a good girlfriend in New Jersey, and she does go to church. But every phone call, it is, and excuse me for using this, but I'm putting quotes behind it, Oh God, Arliss, you won't believe what happened the other day. We went to the grandson's football game and, you know, this, and oh, Jesus Christ, the weather up here is so bad. And I think and I need to be bold and call that out with her. I've called it out with strangers. I've called it out when I've taught a Bible study, and kind of not too, it was years ago. I remember I had 20 women there, and some of them were tennis players. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, you can use the F word and you can use the SH word, but do not take the name of my God in vain. When you say, it was right after 2/11, and I say, here's when you say, oh my God, it's a prayer as you were jumping out of the top stories of the World Trade Center. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but
I don't like it either. You're right. I'm not bold enough to call people out on it playing golf, you know.
yeah,
Oh, God, I missed that cut. Look.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is a prayer. It's a desperation, or it's a praise. It is not a casual term.
Arliss, I'll be honest with you. When I hear somebody in anger or whatever go, Jesus Christ, or something like that, okay, then that's like, oh, that's not good. But I have never, and I'm glad you said this, because I have never thought about going, oh my God, da-da-da-da-da. That's something that my family, they do.
I know.
And I have never thought about that, so I will be much more aware of the way I speak.
When I was selling real estate, the lady who sat behind me and sat in front of me would be on the phone, and she was pretty loud, and she was, Jesus Christ, that house just came on the market, and I tapped her on the shoulder one time, and I said, Kay, I hear the name of God and Jesus coming out of your mouth more than I did when I went to church on Sunday. And I really find that offensive. And from there on, she would still say, oh my God, or Jesus Christ, and then she would turn around and say, sorry, Arliss.
Yeah.
Never changed her. It's deeply ingrained that you cannot take Allah's name in vain.
No.
And I admire them that they stand on that.
There was a comical thing that happened years ago. I think it was when people were doing the same thing about saying the word God like that. And they said, you never hear anybody saying, oh, Buddha.
Yeah. That's right.
I mean, that kind of smacks people in the face if you would do that. And that would be, of course, the wrong thing to do, politically correct. But it's just one of those things that, why do they have to take those names?
Yeah.
And then is it little G-O-D, not capital G-O-D? When they, in their minds, are they thinking of God, capital G, or is it little G?
Good question. She posed a big question at the beginning of the video. Are we willing to do what Elijah did to get what Elijah got? You haven't had a week to think about it, but as you think about it, maybe come back next week a little more prepared to answer that question. Are you willing to do what Elijah did? To stand boldly before a king and say, my God is alive. Your God, Baal, is not. Yeah, Marjorie, you can later say something.
Yeah, I've thought about this one an awful lot, and I can tell you right now that I want to be able to answer yes, but I'm not sure there's not some of Peter in me. And when it comes right down to it, will I stick or will I run away? That is if you really think about it, that is so difficult. But I would hope everybody in this room would want to say, oh yeah. But the reality is I'm not absolutely certain I would. I pray that I would.
Yeah.
And I hope that God's strength will sustain me in those situations. But there just may be a little bit of fear in me.
Yeah. Well,
We watched a movie last night that I had a hard time going to sleep. It was The Edge of War and Hitler's rise. And these two men, one German and one English, knew how bad, how awful he was and what his real plans were, even as Chamberlain is trying to appease the situation. And the German guy has a gun, and he works for Hitler, and he goes in with the intent of killing him to stop the madness that he knows is going to happen. And I keep saying, pull the gun, pull the trigger.
yeah.
Stop this.
Yeah.
Stop this. It's not too late. Stop this.
Yeah.
And he chickens out, and millions of people die.
Die.
And then I thought, Lord, would I have been able? Because he would, of course, lost his life or be tortured or whatever. He didn't stop because he knew Hitler was okay. He stopped because he just didn't have the bravery. And then I
We're
thought,
faced
well,
with, but see,
I don't know that I would.
But see, that, I think that's the point that I'm gotten out of being a one-time wonder here. We live in at a time where there's all sorts of stuff going on that forces us as individuals, especially Christian individuals, to really stop and think, am I going to take a stand here? Am I going to say something here? Is this important enough? What would it take for every single one of us in this room to put on our masks and go march somewhere? What are we willing to march for?
That's a good question.
And I have to tell you, it's really hard for me to come up with an answer for that. What are every single one person in this room that affects our faith, what are we willing to go downtown and march for? That's where the rubber hits the road, and I'm with Margie. This is where I struggle powerfully with this, because I want to do something that bold, and here I sit.
Well, think about this week. And as you do, turn to page 8 with day 1 of your study. I know you haven't done this yet, but I want you to feel emboldened to go ahead and be doing the study this week, because it's not so much that you're hunting up gazillions of scripture yeah, there are some, but it's really a personal reflection, so much of it. But let's start with a little bit on day 1 so that you get rolling and don't put it all off until next Monday night. If you do it, there's only about 5 pages a day, 5, 6, some days there's only 4. So it's not an overwhelming amount of material. It's not like a Beth Moore study where you got the Bible, you almost need 2 Bibles to be referencing. So let me just read and get us started in the introduction here. I was scrolling mindlessly through my Instagram feed one day when a particular image snagged my attention, startled me, sort of grossed me out, to tell you the truth, peeking out from underneath my paused thumb. You know how you can see something that's a little disturbing to you, a little provocative, and even though you really want to turn away, you somehow can't seem to stop looking. It was kind of like that. Half of the image showed a beautifully poised, perfectly arched ballerina's foot, smooth, elegant, and dainty. Her cream-colored slipper fit like a satin glove, along with a silk ribbon woven meticulously up her ankle, completing the classic look. It was everything you'd expect, like a piece of fine art. So pretty, so precise. But then, the other side. And this other side told a much different story, the real story. Directly next to the dancer's lovely, shapely right foot was her other foot, her bare foot, without its slipper, and the contrast was visibly striking. Whole nails were missing. Several of the knuckles, swollen red, were bandaged, blistered, or bleeding. Fragments of old stained gauze remained stuck to oozing sores. Knobs of contorted, misshapen bones bulged grotesquely beneath the skin. And along with the picture ran the following caption, or words similar to this effect. Everyone wants the glory, but few are willing to pay the price required to get it.
Yeah.
Well, ain't that the truth? We want the highlight reel, not the practice session, not the years of hard work, not the consistent pattern of sacrifice, not the going over and over again of the same repeated steps and movements, the stretching, the soreness, the getting out of bed on cold, sleepy mornings, the slow, slow walk of patience, whatever it takes to get it right. Truth be told, when we scroll through our social media feeds, we only want to see the ballerina slipper. It's prettier and more palatable. The worn parts, the beat-up parts, douse the wildfire of our romantic imagination. Reality is too much for us to deal with. A close look at the hours of preparation, the years of hard work, and the grueling cost required to get there are not what we came to see, so we conveniently ignore that part. If we're honest with ourselves and each other, that's how we tend to read the Bible. And so she goes on here and lists some Old Testament personalities and asks what highlights come to mind. Write your thoughts below. So see, you don't even have to look anything up on this first one. You just, like Noah, what comes to mind? The ark, the flood. Abraham.
The covenant of God and Isaac.
Moses.
Delivered the people from Egypt.
The Red Sea. Samuel.
He named Saul and David the kings of Israel.
Yeah, you want a king? We'll give you a king.
Yep. I think about his beard and his strength. But Esther.
Such a time as this.
You were meant for a time like this.
Yep. And so when you turn the page, she says, now think of someone who's living today, even if it's someone you may not know personally, whose life you admire from afar. And what are some of the character highlights you've seen in him or her that impressed you the most? The first person that came to my mind, and you all will have different people as you go through this, was Condoleezza Rice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She just jumps out as someone that's so, her character is so awesome.
Yeah, I chose Jimmy Carter. Maybe not the world's greatest president, but what a human being.
I was at an eco convention where Condoleezza Rice
Yes, me
spoke,
too.
and people said, would you consider running for president? And people started to clap.
Well, I said no.
She said no.
Good morning.
Hello, how's
Get you-
everybody?
Hi, good morning.
Good.
I know
We
you.
thought it was Elijah coming in.
Shit. No, he's not here.
He's not here?
Y'all need anything? Need a drink?
We need some boldness.
Boldness.
Oh, I'm looking at it.
Yes.
I live with it, so I know it's in the room.
You know it's in the room.
Good to
Thank
see
you for
y'all.
stopping by, Farrah. As you read on, and you can think of fill in the spaces you want, Several years ago, I took on the task of reading the Bible through in a year. Frankly, I found it a bit overwhelming. Wrangling 3 small children at the time probably had a little something to do with it. Maybe I needed the 2-year plan where I could take it more slowly and digest things a little more fully that way. Yet I distinctly remember when I came to Elijah's narrative in 1 Kings that year, how I felt completely consumed by the startling boldness of his faith, especially the one big highlight that stands out from his story, Mount Carmel. And so then she will take you into scripture here, 1 Kings 18, 19 through 39. And as she says, it is a sizable portion of scripture, but she'll ask you to list the elements from the holy encounter that demonstrate his faith and the courage and commitment and prayer, and she'll go on from there. But you can see you're halfway through, third of the way through the day 1, so I got you started for day 1. And she will come to the question on page 12 of are we willing to do what Elijah did to get what Elijah got. And what excites you the most as you contemplate the question, and what scares you the most? We've sort of hit on what scares us the most, I guess, but is there anything that excites anybody about this study?
Getting closer to God.
Yeah.
To be doing it.
To just be doing it, yeah.
Back together again.
As a group, you know. It's so wonderful. As Farah said, we have the boldness, we're all here, you know, and that speaks wonders. And I'm assuming everybody's been vaccinated 3 times now, so we're all pretty good. But I challenge you to, you know, maybe do one of the days on a 5-day basis. Spread it out over 5 days so that you can think a little bit. I tend to be one of those people that you give me an assignment and I go and do it, and then I have to stop and think, what did I just do? And so I end up having to go back and reread things. But just do one day at a time, and it's not going to take but maybe 20, 30 minutes of your day to go through this. And I think you'll get a lot more out of this study than, I'm not saying you won't get anything out of it by just seeing the videos, but you'll get more out of it because she will make some references in the video to things in this study. But
Pauline, are the videos available on the church webpage like they usually were?
They're still trying to figure out the legalities of that. The church has 3 things we can things we can access, but we don't know if we're opening it up to 20 or 50 people, what the pricing would be, or if that's okay. So Brad was looking into that for us.
Yeah, because
But we're trying, we're capturing everything today.
because we've done it before,
Yes.
and if it's on
But
our,
it's a different
different company.
well, yeah.
So they're looking into the legalities of that, but we're capturing everything today. And like I said, the church has 3 different ones right now that are legal for us
Right.
to use.
Okay.
So we're trying to come out with whether that's enough. Or if there's a set fee we can do just to open it up. The other thing, if everybody wants to, next week, we can do a quick review of the 5 days.
Yeah, I think.
And I think that at least hitting the real highlights of it. Because there's some really important parts to each set of the work that we do that helps us understand what she's going over.
Yeah. And Margie will be your facilitator for the next couple of weeks. And then I'll pick up midway through. But yeah, I think if we, since the way this is set up is that you see a video before you even have your book, I think it would be a good idea to review. And we can do
And
that.
And it's really good reading. If
Yeah,
you do,
yeah.
I mean, if you feel compelled to answer the questions, but it's really good reading.
Yeah.
It's like watching the video.
Mhm.
Her written word is marvelous.
When we started preparing for this, I used this as my devotion time every morning, going through what the day would be. And after a while, I got to where I wanted to sneak forward and
Yeah.
do the next one. So you may get caught up in it if you kind of slog through a couple or 3 days. By the time you've done like 2 weeks, you're like, okay, where are we going now?
Yeah,
So
She tells
give
it in
yourself
story
the
form,
chance
yeah.
to get captured by it.
mhm. But just don't get discouraged by the homework. Like Margie says, just read it then. Don't worry about answering, but be thinking about it,
Yeah.
okay?
My grandmother said that if you could get through Kings and Chronicles, you can read anything.
Probably true. Let me close us in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together, for this time to explore one of your great servants, Elijah, and be with us as we go out this week and study more about him and help us become bold warriors for you. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Eileen, I got one more prayer request I forgot to mention.
Yes.
Don't know if you all know that Jerry Gaylord has COVID. He's 91.
Oh, wow.
Jamie is trying to keep him isolated so she doesn't get it. Because
Yeah.
she's still recovering for her lungs from when she had it.
Oh.
So, yeah,
So is he at home?
he is.
Let's add him to your
Yes,
list.
please
for
add
the
him
morning.
to your list.
Yes.
They really need our prayers right now.
Before you go, do you mind if I say something?
No, go ahead.
Go for
This
it.
is the time to do it.
I don't normally do this, so this is like jumping out of my comfort zone here. But as we were talking about this study with Elijah, all right, is there anyone here on session?
No,
On session?
I'm probably the only one.
Tonight, Farrah's going to be presenting a report that he has been working on since before he was officially here, I guess. He started when, before he was officially here in the office, he started coming to staff meetings and just being here incognito some. And I'm real nervous, but it was just weighing on me. And as we talked about in this study about hitting the highlights of things, I've been hearing a lot more than the highlights as your pastor's wife, and coming to know this church and these people. Not everybody do I get the names, but deep in my heart and my soul. And this is an amazing church. Just an amazing church with an amazing group of people, and more things than I can ever begin to keep track of. I don't know how you do it. But he's gone through all the Oksana studies and all the other stuff. And there's so many people here may only know the highlights of some of that, or you may only know, like she was saying, that some of the gritty, dirty, bleh, awful stuff, the fights, the this, that, and the other. I don't know. But there is so much good here. And tonight he will be presenting in this the first of probably several every other month quarterly type reports that he will be going in detail with your session. And looking at all of the amazing, wonderful, good things, and looking at the hard stuff, the really hard stuff. And so for such a time as this, he mentioned to me last night when I said about the Elijah study, and I was trying to go through the stuff that Rita had sent us, and he said, this is strange because I'm looking at Elijah for
some of the stuff he's going to be doing and presenting with the session and doing some of these other things. So the fact that this dovetails together is no coincidence. It's a God thing. And we will be looking, the church will be looking at what are these idols that have been up there, that have been part of the church from a long time, and that what's next? How bold can you be as individuals, as people, as groups of people, as women of faith, to step out and do some of these hard things that have to happen? So please be in prayer. Please be in prayer about this, because this is really, he's come to really love here. And if and when y'all decide to call in a new pastor, which is supposedly what this is all leading to, it would be really hard, because I've been telling him, let's make this our home church. He's like, I don't know if I can do that. But so please be in prayer for them, because they have to accept this, and then they have to figure out where they're going with it, and then present it to everyone here, and everyone here has to take it and deal with it, or figure out how they're not.
Session will be interesting.
Please be in prayer for this, because there's just a lot that's going on behind the scenes.
Thanks for that, Cindy. We needed to hear that. Thank you.
And Cindy, a lot of us would not mind him staying either.
Carolyn, I just need those ladies who will